I don't think this is gonna fit. Wonderful. Okay guys, up until this point, it's always been Camaro, LT1, the drivetrain. Typically when you do an engine swap, it's usually here's the car and I'm gonna reveal the engine that's going into it. This time we're taking a little bit of a different tact. Here we got the car, that was the first episode. The second episode is what car is that LT1 going into? And here it is. This is a 1985 635 CSI. This car was known back then in the 80s as being the premier pinnacle of luxury in the BMW and luxury car enthusiast communities. This car has been purchased by my customer. It was a Florida car originally. It was purchased for a pretty good price in the mid 2000s, and the pictures were quite misleading when he had initially purchased the car because it was sight unseen down in Florida. He currently lives in Massachusetts now, and there were a couple of really big ticket items that could have decreased the value of this car significantly had he known about them. Yes, there's very little bit of rust on this, which is very beneficial and a good swap candidate, but there's a lot of age. The drivetrain did not work. The M30 had issues, which is currently actually being used in a different swap, so there is no engine in this right now. A couple things were not disclosed when the customer purchased this car originally. Dent in the taillight needs a lot of work. That would have decreased the value of the car. The condition of the rear seats was significantly underplayed, if not completely eliminated from the negotiations during the original buy. The pictures made this car look a lot better than it really was. And when my customer received it, he was quite surprised as to the actual condition. So this is actually quite a good swap candidate for any type of engine swap, and we're gonna be doing the LT1 V8. So now that we talked a little bit about the car in which the LT1 will be going into, we're now gonna be talking a little bit more about the LT1 itself, get that thing out and start to assess the condition, and most importantly, when you're doing any engine swap, is engine position. That includes the most defining characteristic of the engine swap, the oil pan and the subframe clearance. That is really what's going to end up defining exactly how everything fits inside of this drivetrain, and it'll dictate drive shaft length, shifter shortening if necessary, subframe modifications, steering rack installation. There's a lot that the oil pan and subframe interference defines. Once that's all defined and taken care of, everything else kind of just fits around that, just like we did with the E30 N54. I want to start removing things underneath, like the exhaust and the transmission bracket, the shifter stuff, unbolting anything underneath the car that would preclude it from being able to get removed, like including, you can see these two lines here. These two lines are going straight back, and they're going to the differential to cool the diff, and we are going to be removing those lines, obviously, as close to the engine as possible. So what you're about to see is about 7 hours of work. Actually, I'm kidding, it's more like 6. This is so hard. Oh, okay, I think it's good. I don't know what that was all about. 454 horsepower, 6.2 liter LT1 with a Tremac TR6060 6-speed transmission. It's actually funny how this has changed so much from the T56 in a couple of different notable ways that is more BMW than it was before, right? So you have like the remote shift linkage here. So you have your shifter selector rod right here, and then you have your carrier here, both of which will probably need to be shortened or lengthened depending on the position of the drivetrain. The second thing that I noticed that's more BMW is the fact that you have a guibo in the front. You don't have the slip joint in the front with a single U-joint and then going back to a single piece drive shaft. In this case, it's more BMW than it was before with a center bearing and two-piece drive shaft. That's going to make alignment a little bit more complex. It's gonna lose the latitude of having the slip joint be in the front. There are conversions out there, and we might explore that, but I don't think I have too much of a problem keeping the guibo in the front. So now that the engine is out, there's no engine in here, it is time to put that in there with no suspension, no engine suspension or suspension of any kind, sit it in and see how it will fit and what needs to be modified, what needs to be changed, the subframe, the steering rack placement, the front sway bar, what needs to be changed. And I'm telling you right now, there's going to be a lot of significant modifications to this. So we're just gonna keep on rolling with the punches. We're gonna get it in and we're just gonna see where those chips fall.
I don't think this is gonna fit.
All right, as is, this engine and transmission will not be able to get installed from the top. And I can't get the car high enough to put it underneath. So what I'm gonna do is I'm actually gonna try to extend this boom out longer since I have it on the shortest 2-ton, 4,000-pound setting. I'm gonna get it onto the 1-ton, 2,000-pound setting, and that'll give me the length that I need to get the clearance from the cylinder to the front of the engine such that the boom, the cylinder, is not going to hit the front of the engine before the engine actually gets in the car. So I'm gonna try that and see how that fits and works, and then we'll try throwing it in. I think that this methodology is going to work for getting this engine into this car. I can't get the angle steep enough because of the weight distribution of the transmission and the engine, number one. Number two, I don't think that I'm going to be able to clear the front nose, which is quite a lot longer than most other cars. And number three, the engine seems to be narrow enough where I might be able to lift the car up and scoot it underneath. And I think that that's what I'm gonna try to do in order to get this. Then I can jack the engine up from underneath and get it exactly where it needs to live. The frame rails are just exactly the same width as the width of the exhaust, the header. So I'm probably gonna take the shields off of the exhaust. I wanna try to lower the car down with the, if this doesn't really work, I'm gonna try revisiting putting it in from above and play around with the load leveler a little bit more. Well, add that to the list of things to replace. Wonderful. I don't know how I'm gonna come back from this.